Hey, welcome everybody. My name is EMichele Paul, and I want to welcome all you guys to another segment of Open Mic Weekend Review Editorial and Video. This week I was joined by the 2010 Individual World Poetry Slam Champion Rudy Francisco. We're going to do a three-part interview, and the first part is simply entitled Rudy Francisco Uncut in the beginning. You're going to learn a lot about the man behind the poet, and you'll find out what makes him tick. So without any further ado, let's move into the interview right now as I share with you details from Rudy Francisco. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so tell me, Rudy, how would you describe your poetry to someone that's never heard it? How would you describe your poetry?
I would describe my poetry as very honest and really introspective, especially as of late. It's something that I've been exploring a whole lot more. It's just like the act of being human, and the act of being flawed and emotional at times. Initially, I started off writing just a lot about community work and I started telling the stories of people that I knew and people that I came into contact with. But lately, I've been really just exploring more of myself. So I would describe my style currently as really introspective and very honest.
Hence the title, the reason for your latest CD, Human.
Yeah, that's
So
definitely where it came from.
yeah, because you actually have a poem called Your Honest Poem. Now, is that the actual title?
Yeah, I just call it my honest poem. Yeah.
And in it, why don't you tell us what made you write it, and why did you choose to let us in on the parts that you did let us in about on?
I initially started writing it about almost 4 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, I was in a car. It was myself, Ant Black, Chris Wilson, and I believe Kendrick Dial was there as well. And I had asked them, we were just having a conversation just about poetry, and I had asked them, like, what do you think are some things that I can add to my repertoire of poems to kind of like make myself stand out a little bit more?
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying, you should write about yourself, because none of your poems are about you. Like, you're not the main character in
Mm-hmm.
anything that you write. So I started writing it then, and I actually just finished it like maybe 6 months ago, maybe 7 months ago. Um, and the reason why I chose to let people in on those particular things in my life is because I noticed that people often look at poets like they have no flaws. Um, and I realized that people tend to look at poets like that because we don't talk about our flaws.
Right.
Like, we only talk about the positive things, about the things that we feel strong about, and we never really take the time to explore ourselves. And I'm gonna own that and say, like, before I didn't take the time to explore myself. So that's kind of like why I decided to just be honest and let people in on who I am as a person, instead of people just seeing me as this performer.
Now, do you have like parts to that poem? Because with you explaining it right now, I'm thinking back to your superhero poem and your stripper poem, and maybe you want to explain the stripper poem for those those
Yeah,
people.
the stripper poem is about basically a dialogue that I had with a girl that I was interested in at the time, and she told me that she was an exotic dancer. And like, my reaction to that I was kind of surprised. And then I thought to myself, I was like, well, I'm a performer. Like, we basically take off pieces of ourselves for people to see, and for their entertainment, and about how they are fairly different, but they have a lot of similarities as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like why I decided to write the poem about stripping, because I feel like to a certain degree, like, what we're doing as artists on stage is that we're taking off pieces of ourselves and letting people look at us pretty much bare.
Yeah. Your superhero poem?
The superhero poem is kind of similar as well. As a kid, I remember watching cartoons and watching like X-Men and like Superman and Batman and what have you, and thinking to myself, like, I would never want to be a superhero because that's so much responsibility.
Yeah.
About how, as a kid, like, I kind of felt sorry for them. Like, they have to do all these things for people that they don't even know, and they have this obligation to do that because they have this superpower, and they feel like they have this obligation to use it for good. And as an artist, I also feel like we're very similar in that sense, that we have this talent, and we have an obligation to use it for good, and the struggles that you have with that, because it's like, sometimes you just want to be just a regular person, and at times people don't see you like that. They see you as like this 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 figure that's on a pedestal,
Yeah.
and they forget to, actually take the time to realize that, you're a regular person as soon as you step off the stage. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like at times we use the stage as an escape.
Mm-hmm.
We can be whoever we want on stage,
Yeah.
but once we step off stage, we can only really be us.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's an escape for a lot of people.
They have a question about that, but we'll
Mhm.
we'll get to that later on in a deeper part of the conversation.
Mhm.
So, okay, you know how when you're a kid or when you're like 20, 30 years old, and then you're reflecting back to the first time that you ever had intercourse? I want you
Whoa.
I want you to I want you to close your eyes right now and give me your first poetry experience.
My first poetry experience.
She was
um, a few of my friends, I don't know how we got on the subject, but a few of my friends told me that they wrote as well.
uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Where do you guys like go to, like recite your poems? And they're like, oh, we go to a spot called Clear Day Lune. And at the time they had done a Tuesday night open mic night every Tuesday. So I went, I signed up, and I was nervous the entire time. Like I was shaking. And the host finally called my name, and like my heart dropped, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna tell people this poem that I don't even know if it's good or not, because I didn't know any other like poets really. Like my friends, they wrote, but they weren't like, none of them classified themselves as poets. So I didn't know if it was good or not. I didn't know how it was gonna be received. So I went up there and I did it. And afterwards, like so many people came up to me, said, "Wow, like I really enjoyed that. Like where else do you perform?" And I was like, "I don't really. This is my first time." And they're like, "Oh wow, like you should check out like this place and this place and this place." And they told me about all these other venues around San Diego that allowed you to come and recite your poems. So I started going to those as well, and that's kind of like how it all started. Like I just fell in love with being on stage.
Man. So you got your first
Mm-hmm.
nut at Claire de Lune's.
Yes. Yeah, that was the first time I performed.
Yes, I said it.
Yeah.
Wow. And so when was the next time you went back? Was it the next day, a week later? Did you do a different poem?
I believe I went back maybe a few weeks later, because at the time I was a resident advisor at my university.
Mm-hmm.
So I had like days where I would have to be on duty, and I would have to be on the campus.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't just like go and come and go whenever I wanted to, because like I said, I had duty. So I believe I went back maybe a few weeks later, and that was also like when I met Aunt Black. No. Actually, I went to a different spot because my cousin, he was going to San Diego State at the time, and he was taking an Africana Studies course.
Mm-hmm.
And they told him that he would get extra credit if he went to this open mic called Floetic Escape. So my cousin called me. He was like, "Yo, you want to go to this open mic?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll go." And I performed there, and that's where I met Aunt Black, who later became my mentor. But then like he told me about a few more like other places, and then like I started pretty much going at least once a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And since that time, how has your poetry changed?
My poetry has changed a lot. Just like the things that I talk about, like initially, like I said, I was talking about like a lot of community issues, and now I speak more about myself and things that I've been through like personally. And I try to like just talk about things that I normally wouldn't tell people just in regular conversation.
Mm-hmm.
My writing is very different now. Before, I used to rhyme a lot. And now, like I use a lot more metaphors and similes and a lot more figurative language.
A lot more metaphors.
Yeah, because like initially I didn't know how to write a poem without rhyming. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, how do I still make it sound like a poem and not just me talking?
Right.
And I just looked up like poetic elements,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, okay, you can use metaphors, you can use similes and whatnot. And I didn't really know how to use them at first. Because I didn't really know what I was doing. But one day...
Wow, this is an exclusive. Rudy is saying that he didn't know how to use a metaphor.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like I knew what it was, but I didn't know how you were supposed to go about using it. So one day, me and Aunt Black, we were sitting at Popeyes. And he was like, oh, let's do an exercise. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. He was like, you got to describe something in this room. And at the time, like I said, I didn't know how to use a metaphor or simile or anything like that. And I was stuck. And he was like, okay, well, I'll go first. And he looks at the cashier, and he says, the eyes are the window to the soul, and her curtains are painted pink because she had on pink eyeshadow. And I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And then, like, I was still trying to do it, but I really couldn't do it. So we got into the car and we were headed to a meeting, and he was just like making metaphors and similes out of like everything that he saw on the way to the meeting. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, because at that point I realized that you don't really have to rhyme. You know, you can do other things to still make it a poem.
Yeah.
And I kind of just like took that and ran with it. Like I went home and I was like practicing on like how to turn things into metaphors and how to turn things into similes, and choosing figurative language and poetic license a whole lot more often. And that's kind of like how like my style evolved into what it is now.
So one more time, can you say that there was a time where you didn't know how to use a metaphor again?
Yeah. There's definitely a time where I did not know how to use a metaphor.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that they heard it here.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you're on stage? What does it feel like?
You know, initially, right before I get on stage, I'm a nervous wreck. Like, I can't even hold conversations with people because I'm just so nervous. Like, my hands get shaky, my legs get shaky. But it usually goes away once, like, my first line comes out. After the first line, I kind of go on autopilot because I know my poems so well because I spend so much time like rehearsing them and making sure that I have them down, that like it's almost like driving home at the end of the day. It's like once you get in your car, you don't think about every turn that you're gonna make because you've done it so many times.
Right.
And I think like my poems are very much the same way. Like once I start a poem, it's almost like getting in the car, and then like after that, it's like I just end up home, and it's like, you know, my poem is done, the people are clapping, I'm like, oh, okay, and then I leave.
How many times have you been on stage in your life?
A lot. I've been performing almost like 6 or 7 years now. Possibly 1,000 times. I don't know.
And you still get nervous?
I still get nervous every time. Yeah.
But that's a good thing.
Yeah, I would be worried if I wasn't nervous.
Where's the one place where you feel the most comfortable?
Elevated.
Really?
Definitely the most comfortable place for me. It's home. You know, it's something that I played an intricate role in building. So like whenever I'm there, and like the crowd is just, there's just so much love and so much energy in the room. Like that's the most comfortable place for me. Because people know me already, so I know I can try out something new there, and people won't be like, oh, he's terrible. Yeah. Even if it's bad, they'll be like, oh, okay, but I know that he has so much other work that's good. Like when you're in front of people who've never seen you before, that's their only impression of you, and you only really get one chance in front of new people. And if it's bad, that's what their perception of you is gonna be like until you do something very drastic to change that.
Yeah. But one of the things that I do notice when I am able to attend is when they know Rudy is there, the crowd is like more hyped. It doesn't matter who the feature is, just let Rudy be in the audience. And if Rudy is the feature, you just need to get there an hour early. We are elevated.
Yeah, I love it there. It's my favorite venue.
Now you have a poem called "If I Was a Love Poet." So what type of poet are you?
I would just consider myself to be just a poet. I write about a whole lot of different things, and it's interesting because people who know me through slam, they don't consider me a love poet at all. It's because I don't slam love poems. It's because it's kind of like an unspoken rule that love poems really don't score very well in slam. But if you actually see me do an entire feature, then you'll see that I write about a whole lot of different things.
It seems like everybody out there claiming they real, but 90% of them are just spitting fallacies. How they in the streets, how they killing beats. These dudes know they ain't sick. They just got allergies. I'll give you food for thought, but count your calories. Yo, listen, I do this for love. I don't do this for fame. They say come with the heat. Call me LeBron James.